There's no such thing as true pantsing in writing. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you a seductive myth. This whole argument between pantsing versus plotting is kind of weird. So, pantsing is this myth that you can just sit down and make up the story as you go, start writing with no plan, and end up with something that works. And then plotting on the other side is consciously structuring your story before writing with a clear understanding of where you're going, even if it's just big milestone moments along the way. Now, I get the appeal of pantsing. I fell for this too early in my writing days because I would have what I thought was this really cool idea for a story. I'd get excited about it. I'd sit down, I'd start writing, and it was almost like I was following kind of a vague trail in the woods that kind of petered out. And before I knew it, I was lost in the woods, didn't know where to go. So I had lots of unfinished manuscripts that I just kind of petered out and I couldn't figure out what to do with them. And then I even had some manuscripts that I actually finished. I got to the end, I wrote the end, and then I took those to an editor and found out that pretty much from chapter one, they didn't work. Okay, so here's the thing. There is no such thing as pantsing where it leads to an actual working, well-written book that readers are going to love. So hear me out. Okay, let's imagine that you want to drive from Los Angeles, California on the west coast of the United States all the way across the United States to New York City on the East Coast. And let's say this is before times of, GPS and Google Maps that would just take you there. And you've never done this before. You've never driven across the country. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to grab an atlas, grab some maps, and start planning out the trip. Not only are you're going to plan out like all the different milestones along the way, you're going to have a general idea of where you're going, and you're going to make sure to keep that map right there as you're driving so that you don't get lost. Because if you wander off this path that you've mapped out, it's going to be hard to find your way back. Now, then on the other side, imagine you just got in the car and just started driving and hoped that you would eventually end up in New York City. The odds are pretty much stacked against you. You're going to end up driving around, taking turns you don't understand, and not really ending up where you want to go. So now let's imagine you make that trip with the maps and the atlas and you find your way from LA all the way to New York City. You make the drive successfully. And then a couple years later, you do it again. And then maybe a year later, you do it again. And by the fifth, sixth, seventh time you've driven all the way across the country, you don't really need the map anymore. You don't need that atlas anymore because you generally know how to do it. You can literally just get in your car and decide to start driving east, and you can find your way to New York City because you've done it before. So when you have these famous writers like Stephen King saying they don't plot their stories, they just sit down and start writing with an idea in their head, that's kind of weird because then if you actually read the books, you see the same moments happening over and over and over across all of their stories because he's done this so many times. He knows how to find his way where he's going from the very beginning. And so the writers I've found that can do this, can come up with an idea and just sit down and start writing, it's because they have a lot of experience. They're a professional writer with a lot of skill and a lot of experience. And so they're able to find their way to the end of their book, even though they didn't write anything down or plot it out from the beginning. The plot is in their head. Those same things that other people have to actually write down, they're just doing it in their head. And so if you are an amateur writer, a newer writer, somebody that hasn't done this successfully, the idea that you can just sit down and start writing and find your way through 50, 60, 100,000 words to a book that actually works, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Not because something's wrong with you, not because you're missing some magical thing called talent or the muse doesn't like you. It's just you don't have the skill yet. You don't know how to actually do this. So every well-written, readable book comes from some form of plotting. Truly pantsed writing without any sense of structure or genre or required story moments always, every single time, produces an unreadable, unworkable mess. The exceptions, what you see from famous pantsers, are always people with years, sometimes decades, of deeply internalized story structure. They aren't pantsing, they're running it on intuition built from mastery. So if you're new or you're struggling, trying to pants your way to a novel is a recipe for getting lost, getting stuck, confused, and ultimately giving up. you're going to end up in a place where you've wasted years and probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of words of stuff that wasn't ever going to work. So you need to study story structure, master your genre, learn obligatory moments, and figure out the conventions for your kind of story and plan this out before you write. The best way to build this skill is by practicing scenes because every story is built from scenes, and writing enough of them teaches you how the bigger structure actually comes together. So this whole pantsing versus plotting thing is just a fake argument. Pantsing doesn't exist. You have people that plan out their story and write it down ahead of time, or people that know stories so well they can just get started and find their way to a working story. Everybody else, if you try to pants it, you're not going to write anything that actually works. I don't want that to happen to you. I wasted years and years of my life trying to pants my way to a good story, and it wasn't until I actually learned story structure and how to write great scenes that build towards full stories that I actually wrote something I was proud of. And that's what I want for you too. And so this is why we practice scene writing here at Story Grid, because a reader doesn't experience your book as a book, they experience it one scene at a time. And if you can't write great scenes that pull the reader through and get them excited to read the next scene and the next scene and the next scene, well, they're going to close your book and never come back and read it. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I highly recommend you join us for our scene writing workshop. This is a 6-week workshop where we walk you step by step how to write great scenes, but not just that. You're going to get expert feedback on your writing. For the first time ever, you're going to turn in your scenes and an expert's going to show you what's working, what's not working, and how you can get better. We've had so much success in this program. Many of the writers say that they've learned more with us in 6 years than 6 weeks on their own. In fact, recently a guy that's been trying to get published for over 40 years, he joined our workshop and he took the scene that he wrote and fixed in our workshop, submitted it to a paid publication, and it got selected. For the first time in over 40 years of trying to get published, he got published. He beat out over 250 other writers to get his writing published in this magazine. This is an amazing workshop. I really want you to join it. There's so much more involved, but you can go check out everything at storygrid.com/workshop to find out more. Now, with all of these scene writings, there's these really set things that have to be in every scene in order for them to work. In fact, we have a checklist we put together. It's the checklist we use when we're checking scenes to see what's working and what's not. I want to give you a copy of that for free. So you can go to storygrid.com/checklist, put in your email address, and download that checklist for absolutely free. My gift to you so that you can start learning how to write great scenes. Now, in this video, I talked a lot about learning structure. Well, where do you start with that? I recommend you start with genre, and I have a great video that's going to walk you through how this works. So it's either on your screen right now or right below this video. Click that to watch the next video, and then you can keep learning about genre and structure so you're not stuck writing and writing and writing and it never actually working. But either way, thanks so much for being a writer. Thanks for being a part of our community here at StoryGrid, and I'll see you next time.